Thank you. Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Elmendorf, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure that Americans, real-world Americans that are watching today's testimony, their eyes are glazing over, and so for them, I would summarize it to
I'm
say
offended,
that,
Congressman.
What's that?
I'm offended.
No, that's no offense to you. But I would like to summarize that, economics is essentially the mathematical expression of aggregate human and business behavior. And in that vein, I'd say that this latest CBO report, I think, is a better reflection of aggregate human employee and employer behavior over time as a result of government policy. Obamacare is one policy that has been enacted by the federal government. In addition to that, there were several other policies that have been enacted over the last 5 years that have affected our economy. In your report, you've talked about the impact of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, on the supply side of the equation in terms of what employees or prospective employees do. And you said that the equivalent of 2.3 million jobs would be lost due to expressed because, let me rephrase that millions of hours would be of labor would be less would be offered, and expressed as job losses would be 2.3 million. So not to say that 2.3 million jobs would be lost. Have you looked at the demand side of the equation? The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, has a huge impact on employers, and they are making economic decisions to determine how many employees they hire and what sort of hours that they ask these employees to work. Can you tell me in a short amount of time what impact that's had? Yes,
Congressman. So we looked and report in our outlook on the effects of the Affordable Care Act on the demand for labor. We highlighted two channels. One was the one that Congressman Van Hollen spoke about earlier, which is the effect on the overall demand for goods and services in the economy, and thus on employment. The other is the effects of the employer penalty on the demand for labor. In the very short run, for a given level of wages, requiring employers to pay some penalty amount for each of their employees in some circumstances amounts to raising the cost of those employees and would lead employers to reduce their number of people they hire. But we expect, as other analysts believe, that over time, costs that employers bear for their employees end up being borne by the employees in the form of lower wages. Health insurance costs are one example, and this mandate would be another. So we think that after a few years, the costs of the employer mandate are basically showing up in wages, and thus are affecting ultimately workers' supply of labor, but no longer the employer's demand for the most part.
Just to summarize that, you essentially took the potential negative impact on labor demand and translated it further into labor supply.
Yes, because the way we think wages will adjust.
Okay, I can live with that. I mean, I don't like the fact that we're hurting labor supply or labor demand, either one. I think that's bad policy, and that we as Republicans in the House are going to put forward our replacement alternative that doesn't do that, that encourages labor supply and labor demand. The CBO routinely analyzes administrative actions and tries to determine the impact on the economy. That process isn't terribly transparent at this point. But when you take Obamacare and EPA actions and Department of Labor actions and Fish and Wildlife actions, you go down through every agency, and they've issued tens of thousands of regulations over the last 5 years. What has been the impact? And I ask you from this frame of reference, as a person who has created or helped create hundreds of jobs in the real world, I know firsthand the impact of bad government policy. And I was wondering, do you have a cumulative number of potential jobs lost because of Obamacare and all the government policies that have been enacted in the last 5 years?
I'm sorry, Congressman, we do not. Our focus, as you know, is in estimating the effects of legislation that Congress is considering.
Okay.
We do have to go back and look at how laws are being administered in order to do our baseline projections, and that's part of why we looked at the Affordable Care Act again this time. But we don't do any sort of comprehensive analysis of the effects of regulatory policy.
I think that would be well served, because I mean, I think one of the reasons the labor force participation rate is so low is because employers have decided that they can't hire those types of employees where they stand, and so the employee base is given up, or prospective employee base is given up. I'd just say that the government policy that's happened in the last 5 years is expanding the poverty trap. It's it's pushing families out of the middle class and hurting
Sorry.
their opportunities. I'll get back.
Sorry.